Welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive into something totally different.
You bet. Today we're going deep into Brazilian music and history, but not in the usual way.
Right. We're using a protest song as our guide.
Exactly. And not just any song.
Yeah.
Fado Tropical. Written in 1973, a year packed with tension in both Brazil and Portugal.
Oh, 1973, a turning point for both countries.
Yeah, absolutely.
So our main source is this really cool paper called A Humongous Portugal, The Funny Fate of Being a Colonial Empire.
Yeah, great paper.
It takes this song, Fado Tropical, and breaks it down
It really does.
to find all these layers of meaning about Brazil's identity, and the power of art when things get rough.
You know, it really shows you how powerful music can be, especially when things are tough.
For sure. So to understand Fado Tropical, we got to go back in time a bit, set the scene for us, what was happening in the world when this song came out.
Okay, imagine this. It's the 70s. Brazil's under a military dictatorship.
Right.
Meanwhile, over in Portugal, they're going through the Carnation Revolution, a huge shift towards democracy.
Okay, the Coronation Revolution, I remember learning about that. Wasn't that all about peaceful protests and, well, carnations?
Exactly. People were literally putting carnations in soldiers' rifles. So powerful.
Wow, really?
It's like America's flower power movement, but
Right.
with a fascinating twist. The Portuguese people were actually thanking their military for restoring democracy.
Oh, interesting. It makes you think about how different paths to change can be.
Definitely. So we've got these two countries linked by history, but going through major shifts in completely different ways.
Yeah.
And then, bam, right in the middle of all this, Fado Tropical comes out.
It's like the perfect storm, right?
Right. So like the song is capturing all this tension.
So before we get into the lyrics themselves, let's talk about Fado music. Fado Tropical is like a twist on traditional Fado, right?
Yeah, so understanding the original style helps us really appreciate how the song plays with expectations.
Okay, so give us the Fado 101. What are we listening for?
Think longing, what the Portuguese call saudade. It's melancholic, full of emotion, often featuring the Portuguese guitar.
Gotcha. So kind of mournful and beautiful at the same time.
You got it. And Fado Tropical takes that traditional sound and, well, turns it on its head.
So it's Fado, but with a message.
More than that, it uses that mournful sound to deliver this really sharp critique of colonialism and the elite's dream of Brazil becoming this humongous Portugal.
Whoa, okay, so it's got an edge. It's not just your typical love song.
Not at all. And there's another layer to this, too. The song was written for a play that's also super controversial.
Really? Tell me more.
It's called Calabar, in praise of treason. Even the title makes you think, right? Both the play and Fado Tropical challenge those official historical narratives, the accepted stories, and make you question easy answers about right and wrong.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. Let's dig into those lyrics. What are some of the lines that stand out? How does the song use satire?
Oh, there are so many great examples. One that comes to mind is the line about water lilies in the Caatinga.
Wait, the Caatinga, isn't that really dry region in Brazil?
You got it. It's practically a desert. So picturing delicate water lilies growing there.
It's like completely absurd.
Exactly. The songwriters are playing with this imagery to show how ridiculous it is to force Portuguese ideals onto Brazil.
Like trying to make something bloom where it just can't.
Exactly. And then there are these spoken word parts, almost like whispers, that are darkly funny. One describes a heart that forgives. At the same time, the hand is executing brutal sentences.
That sends chills down my spine. What do you think they're getting at with that?
It really highlights the hypocrisy at the heart of power, right? They talk about compassion, but are totally okay with violence.
Oh, yeah, it's like this double message.
Right, and it shows you how messed up things were back then, how emotion and brutality were just mixed together.
Yeah, that one line really says so much.
It does, and it's not just the lyrics, the music itself is part of the satire, too.
Really? How so?
Okay, listen to the rhythm. It's steady, almost epic sounding, which emphasizes that grand ambition, but also hints at the clumsiness of this whole humongous Portugal fantasy.
Oh, I see. It's like the music is mocking the idea.
In a way, yeah. And then there's that big melodic peak near the end.
Yeah. It really drives home the final line, colonial empire, right?
You got it. It's like the music is saying, this is what it all leads to. This grand idea just ends up being more of the same.
Wow, it's amazing how they weave together the music, lyrics, and history to create this critique.
It's really masterful. And on top of all that, Fado Tropical connects to these bigger ideas about what it means to be Brazilian.
Okay, like what?
It brings up this concept called cultura do vira-lata, or the culture of the mud.
Cultura do vira-lata. Okay, you got to explain that one.
Sure, it's basically this feeling of inferiority that Brazilians have compared to, more developed nations. The song seems to be saying, no matter how much Brazil tries to be great, it's stuck copying and ultimately just continuing these colonial patterns. It's like being a stray dog, always looking up at the purebreds.
That's such a powerful image.
Yeah, and it really resonates. That shift from humongous Portugal to colonial empire at the end, it's like saying Brazil can't escape its past no matter how big it gets.
It's kind of a bleak outlook.
It is, but it gets even deeper than that. Think about the word brasileiro itself, the word for Brazilian.
Okay.
You can actually trace it back to a term used for low-wage workers in the Brazilwood trade. Talk about a loaded word, right?
Whoa, so the very word for Brazilian is tied to exploitation.
Yeah, it's heavy stuff. It shows you just how complex national identity can be, especially for a country with a history like Brazil's.
It makes you wonder if it's even possible to escape that colonial empire fate.
Yeah, that's the big question lurking beneath it all. And while Fado Tropical doesn't give us a clear answer, it definitely gives us a lot to think about.
It sure does. But before we go down that rabbit hole, let's switch gears for a second and hop back over to Portugal.
Okay.
Remember, Fado Tropical comes out right before the Carnation Revolution. A year later, Borqué writes a song called Tanto Mar, or So Much Sea.
Yes, Tanto Mar.
And you mentioned something earlier about seeds of change.
Oh, yeah. That makes me think about Tanto Mar, right? It's almost like a response to the darkness we see in Fado Tropical.
Okay, so how does Tanto Mar fit into all of this?
Well, in Tanto Mar, Borqué is expressing this deep longing for change in Brazil, like what happened in Portugal.
So he's looking across the ocean and feeling inspired.
You could say that. He even has a line where he talks about how happy he is that Portugal is partying, celebrating their freedom.
I see.
And he wishes he could be there too. Then he asks them to send over some scent of rosemary.
Rosemary. Is that another reference to the Carnation Revolution and all those flowers?
Exactly. But here's where it gets really interesting. In 1978, Borqué releases a new version of the song, and some of the lyrics are different.
Oh, really? What changed?
Well, instead of saying Portugal is partying, he says the party has withered.
Oh, so it's like recognizing that change isn't always easy or lasting?
Yeah, it's acknowledging the struggles of building a democracy.
But it's not all doom and gloom, is it?
No, not at all. He adds this hopeful line about how they certainly forgot a seed in some corner of the garden.
Oh, wow. So Fado Tropical might be about the darkness of colonialism, that feeling of being stuck. But Tanto Mar is offering a glimmer of hope.
Exactly. Even if things are tough, there's still that potential for change.
It's a powerful message.
It is. It shows Borqué recognizing that establishing and keeping a democracy isn't easy, but he's still holding on to that hope for the future, that those seeds of change, as he calls them, could still bloom in Brazil.
I love that. Even when things are dark, there's always that possibility for something better.
Right. And remember, just 6 years after Tanto Mar, Brazil did eventually transition to democracy.
That's amazing. It makes you think about how these songs, these works of art, were actually part of a bigger conversation that helped lead to real change.
They absolutely were. Music has this incredible power, doesn't it? To give a voice to people, to inspire action.
It's happening even today with all the protest music around the world.
You're right. And Fado Tropical shows how art can get people thinking critically about their society, even when things are tough. It's about planting those seeds of awareness.
It makes you think about how artists have challenged those in power throughout history.
They have, and they continue to do so. It's inspiring.
Speaking of challenging power, it makes me wonder, how did a song as pointed as Fado Tropical manage to avoid being completely censored?
That's a great question. And it's one we'll dive into in the next part of our deep dive. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the legacy of Fado Tropical.
It's crazy how Fado Tropical shows this longing for a humongous Portugal and how that ties into Cultura do vira-lata.
Yeah, it really digs into that, doesn't it? But I think there's even more to it than that.
Oh?
What do you mean?
Well, underneath all the satire and wordplay, there's this this sense of nihilism,
Nihilism.
Like,
Yeah.
no matter what Brazil does, they're trapped in this cycle of just mimicking and never truly breaking free.
So even with all its potential, Brazil is doomed to repeat those same colonial patterns.
That's what this song seems to be suggesting. Yeah, it's a pretty bleak outlook.
It is. It makes you think about how colonialism isn't just some event in the past, It still has this hold on us today.
Absolutely. And I think Fado Tropical really captures that feeling of being stuck like Brazil is in this.
Like they're on a hamster wheel?
Yeah. Like no matter what they do, they end up right back where they started under someone else's thumb.
Man, that's both funny and kind of terrifying at the same time.
It is. And remember, this song and the play it was written for were actually censored back then. Right. I'd totally forgotten about that. Given everything we've talked about, I can definitely see why.
Yeah, imagine you're the dictatorship, right? And you've got this play called Calabar, in praise of treason.
Yeah.
And then this song pops up talking about Brazil as a colonial empire.
Oh, yeah. That's not a good look for them, especially with Portugal becoming a democracy around the same time.
Right. They were probably worried these ideas would spread, inspire people to challenge their authority.
So what happened? Were the artists, Borque and Guerra, were they, like, punished?
Well, thankfully, no. The play was banned for 6 years.
6 years.
But the song actually managed to slip past the censors.
Wait, really? But Fado Tropical seems pretty direct with its message.
That's what's so brilliant about it. They use this wit, these layers of meaning, to get the point across without being overtly rebellious.
So it's like a Trojan horse, sneaking in a message under the guise of entertainment.
Exactly, and that's why it worked so well.
It makes me think about how artists throughout history have had to find these creative ways to push boundaries.
It's true. It takes a lot of skill to be subtle and still get your message across.
Right, because if you're too obvious...
You risk getting shut down.
Exactly. But with satire, there's more room for interpretation, which makes it harder to censor.
Right, exactly. And that's why songs like Fado Tropical are so important. They could reach a wider audience and make them think critically about their society, even if they weren't explicitly calling for revolution.
So it's not just about being clever. It's about staying safe, too.
Exactly. And, you know, even though Fado Tropical ends on kind of a down note, the fact that it exists at all, that it made it past the censors and sparked these conversations.
It's pretty inspiring, right?
It is. And remember those seeds Borque sang about in Tanto Mar? Fado Tropical helped plant those seeds, challenged the status quo, and opened up the possibility for something new.
It really shows you the power of art as a form of resistance, even when it's not like screaming its message in your face.
It's about being subtle, being thought-provoking, and that can have a bigger impact than you might think.
It makes you wonder about all the other ways artists have challenged power throughout history.
Right. Think about protest music during the civil rights movement or in South Africa during apartheid. Art can be a voice for those who can't speak for themselves.
And inspire real change. Right?
You got it. And Fado Tropical is a perfect example of that.
It is. It's amazing to think about the impact this one song has had.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you mentioned earlier about how being Brazilian seems tied to this whole idea of adapting and surviving.
Yeah.
But how does that fit into their future in a world with so much uncertainty, with climate change, economic shifts, all those challenges ahead?
That's the big question, isn't it? Can this cultura do viralata, this adaptability, can that actually be a strength when facing all these global issues? Or is it just going to lead to more of the same old patterns?
Yeah, it's like wondering if this viralata thing, this being able to adapt and make do, which, let's be honest, came from some pretty tough circumstances, can actually be a good thing, you know, in this crazy world we're living in. It really is the big question, isn't it? And I don't think there's an easy answer.
Right.
On the one hand, you could say this adaptability makes Brazil stronger, more resilient.
Oh, I see. So they've been through so much that they can pretty much handle anything, right?
Exactly. But then there's this other side to it, this risk that always adapting just means falling back into those same old colonial patterns.
So instead of finding their own way, they just react to what the big guys are doing.
Yeah, it's like they're so good at adapting that they never really get to decide who they are. You know what I mean? They just become whatever the world needs them to be at that moment.
It's like they're stuck in this loop.
And it's a tough spot to be in, right? Because this viralata thing, it's what helped them survive, even thrive, in some really difficult times.
It's what allowed them to find opportunities to create something beautiful out of struggle.
Exactly. Just like how Fado Tropical uses this traditional music, Fado, and flips it into something powerful and subversive.
You're right. It's a perfect example.
But the challenge for Brazil, I think, is to take that adaptability and use it to make real lasting change.
So to not just react, but to lead.
To stop just going with the flow and to step up on the world stage and say, this is who we are, this is what we stand for.
So they need to find a way to channel that viralata energy into something bigger, something more ambitious.
Not about being a copycat or a humongous Portugal, but something that comes from their own unique story and potential.
Yeah, to use what makes them special to shape their own future.
Exactly. It's about taking those seeds of change that Borque sang about in Tanto Mar and nurturing them into something that truly transforms Brazil.
Man, that's a tall order.
It is, but I think they're up for the challenge. They've got such a vibrant culture, such resilient people.
I hope you're right. And I think
Yeah.
this whole deep dive into Fado Tropical has given us, and hopefully everyone listening, so much to think about.
It has. We've uncovered layers of history, explored the complexities of identity, and seen how art can really challenge what we think we know.
It's been a wild ride. And to everyone listening, we encourage you to keep going. Listen to Fado Tropical, listen to Tanto Mar, check out the play Calabar.
And keep thinking about Brazil's journey, past, present, and future.
It's a fascinating story, and we can't wait to see what happens next. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Fado Tropical.
Yeah, it's been a blast. We hope you found it as thought-provoking as we have.